Kelly was instrumental in developing a new strategic plan for the library that was designed to ensure the continued support of the library by community members and the town administration. The strategic plan focuses on better communication between all library stakeholders. Perhaps most importantly, Kelly saw to the completion of the library board investment and spending policy, which was aimed at developing a strategy for the investment of the board's endowments and establishing the intentions, purposes, and goals of the endowment fund. To quote one testimonial, Kelly has demonstrated an exceptional ability to build collaborative relationships with the town and staff, which are underpinning the library's success. She has fostered an environment of trust and mutual respect across the entire organization, enabling a period of unprecedented growth at the Stowe Free Library. The Vermont Library Association is delighted to celebrate Kelly Spear's many years of service to her community with the Trustee of the Year Award, which will be accepted by Stowe's Assistant Director, Molly Nesselrod. The Vermont Library Association's Green Mountain Award is given as the opportunity arises to individuals or organizations for distinguished service, support, or unusual contributions to Vermont libraries. The members of the Working Group on the Status of Libraries in Vermont, chaired initially by Tom McMurdo and then by Catherine DeMio, spent 18 months convening for half-day sessions on a monthly basis to explore a comprehensive range of library issues in Vermont. The working group members solicited feedback from hundreds of stakeholders on topics ranging from intellectual freedom and inclusive services to programming and facilities. The results of these meetings and discussions led to a comprehensive report that was published in November 2023 and delivered to the Vermont legislature. The recommendations by the working group led to the introduction of the landmark bill S-220 by Senators Gulick and Hardy, which has now been passed by the Vermont Senate and House. In addition to their work on the report, the working group commissioned the first comprehensive salary survey for Vermont public library workers in over 2 decades, providing an important tool for public libraries to advocate for fair compensation for all their employees. As one nominator said, as a library director, I'm grateful for the invaluable resources and path forward the group's report provides, shedding light on issues and solutions for our wonderful libraries. It is with immense pleasure and deep gratitude for their contributions to Vermont libraries that the Vermont Library Association honors and thanks the members of the Working Group on the Status of Libraries in Vermont as this year's recipients of the Green Mountain Award. Join me in honoring the group. I'll read the names individually, and if awardees can come up and stay on stage, that would be great so we can get a group shot. Catherine Del Neo, Vermont State Librarian. Tom McMurdo, Assistant State Librarian. Kelly McCagg, Director of Burnham Memorial Library. Christopher Kaufman-Elstrom, Executive Director of the Vermont Humanities Council. Jeanette Barr, retired director of Rochester Public Library. Susan O'Connell, director of Craftsbury Public Library. Wendy Sharkey, director of Bennington Free Library. Meg Allison, librarian at U32 High School in Montpelier. Karen McCalla, teacher librarian at Mill River Union Middle School in North Clarendon. Maria Avery, community outreach manager of the University of Vermont Libraries. Denise Hershey, director of Dana Health Sciences Library at the University of Vermont, and Andy Kolobos, trustee of the Brownell Library and associate director and archivist at Vermont Folklife. Thank you all so much. In addition to our awards recipients, today we also pay a very special tribute to VLA member librarians who have recently retired. One thing will become abundantly clear after I read the list of retirees, and that is that these individuals have dedicated multiple decades of service to Vermont libraries and are tremendously deserving of the recognition for their commitment both to librarianship and their libraries. Lorraine Cole Dolgus started as a substitute librarian at Essex Free Library in 1998 and then became a circulation librarian, a position from which she recently retired. Lorraine cannot join us today, but we've sent her an acknowledgement. Lynn Fontenue McCann recently retired as director of the Bennington Free Library. Lynn started working at Bennington Free in 1998, first as the reference and adult services librarian, later as the director in 2008. In her years as director, Lynn was a constant presence at the library and an ardent advocate for literacy and library services. Please join us in recognizing Lynn's 25+ years of service. Marjorie Strong retired after 25 years as an assistant at the Leahy Library at the Vermont Historical Society. We are told that Marjorie's knowledge of Vermont history, and Barry in particular, is amazing. Please join us in recognizing Marjorie's many years of service to the Historical Society. We wish all our librarians a wonderful retirement. At this time, I'm delighted to welcome our state librarian, Catherine Del Dio, to share remarks.
Good morning, everyone. It's so great to be here with you in this wonderful, beautiful space to reflect on the amazing work you do to empower the communities you serve, even during these uncertain times. Thanks to the efforts of the Vermont Legislature, the Working Group on the Status of Libraries in Vermont, and the advocacy efforts of the leadership of the Vermont Library Association and the Vermont School Library Association, and the leadership of Vermont Humanities, we have a lot to celebrate this year. For some time now, I've been hearing about the challenges faced by colleagues in state libraries and in states across the nation. Stories about a lack of support for the principles of intellectual freedom and access to information, undercutting the foundations of our profession that guide our daily work. Stories about an inability to openly speak to the needs of traditionally marginalized community members, or to advocate for diverse and inclusive collections. Here in Vermont, we have a very different story to tell this year. Our story is one of exploration, listening, and reflection over more than 2 years through the efforts of the working group. Our story is one of convening and sharing to better respond to the ever-evolving needs of our communities in Vermont. Our story is about improving the way we provide service and govern our libraries, focusing more than ever on inclusion and outreach to the communities who need our libraries the most. As we heard from Oceana, following a tremendous effort by the members of the working group and from the team at the Department of Libraries who supported them, Senators Hardy and Gulick introduced S220 this year, an act relating to Vermont's public libraries. After much discussion and testimony, the bill has been approved by the House and Senate and is headed to the governor's desk. Through the consideration of this bill, the profile of the work you do every day has been elevated. The Vermont legislature has shown enormous support for intellectual freedom and for material selection policies at every school and every public library in our state. Those policies need to align not just with the First Amendment, but with the Civil Rights Act and with Vermont's strong anti-discrimination laws. This bill is groundbreaking. At a time when other states are restricting access to ideas, Vermont has reaffirmed that ours is a state that supports self-directed learning and where people are free to read. As Vermont's librarians, we have so much to be proud of this year. That said, we still have some work to do. In anticipation of the passage of the bill, the department has begun drafting model material selection policies. And by the department, I mean Kevin. We'll be working on those policies in the coming months and refining them with the goal of finalizing them by the end of December of this year. And we'll be engaging you along the way. The goal here is that all public libraries and school libraries will implement new policies by July 1st, 2025. So buckle up, people, it's coming. You've got work to do. The department is now going to be empowered to develop other model policies on topics like programming or facilities, service levels for different levels of population served, and we're going to be doing that work incrementally. So don't expect it's all going to happen at once. There are only 18 of us. But we aim to provide those benchmarks to you. And this is all in keeping with the recommendations that the working group made to the department. You may not be aware, but we've also been tasked by the legislature with writing a report on expanding access to early literacy resources with a focus on the highest need areas of the state and looking at book gifting programs. We look forward to learning more about the work other state libraries do in this area and providing the legislature with recommendations on this important topic. And of course, as many of you know, the department has the rare opportunity to award capital projects grants to a handful of public libraries across the state. We know that these funds are not sufficient to fund all of the wonderful projects that we receive applications from. But we still aim to announce these awards later this spring or early summer. And we will run another grant award program in the fall for small and rural libraries. Meanwhile, our regular work continues. After hearing loud and clear about the need for more access to continuing education training, this year the department doubled the number of times it provided the core courses of the Certificate of Public Librarianship program so that we could accommodate more learners. I want to give a round of applause to the consultants who have done twice the work, so thank you. Sometimes we come up with ambitious goals and I get some looks, but this time they were happy to do it, I think. And this is a banner year for us with the certificate program. We will be seeing 33 of our colleagues graduate this year. And I'd like to invite my colleague Joy Borland up. Joy is the department's consultant for continuing education and for small and rural libraries, and she is going to present the certificates to those who are here with us today.
With your help.
With my help. I shake hands. That's about all that they let me do.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you to VLA for giving us this chance to do this. We do have 33 people. They're not all here today, but I just want to thank everyone who has helped us do this and all the people that have participated in the program. The certificate's goal is to create and sustain consistent professional standards throughout Vermont public libraries by providing training to those new to the field and those who have not had other professional library training. Certificate requirements have the 4 core courses that Kathy mentioned: cataloging, collection development, information services, and public library administration, plus required credits in library technology and electives. So it's 150 credits altogether. It's a lot of work, and we just want to recognize it's hard to be an adult learner and go back to get a certificate when you're holding down a job, you're holding down more than one job, you have a family, you might have little kids, you might have aging parents, all those things. And also, many of you might have had your library flooded over the summer, and you probably went through if you've been in the certificate program for 4 years, you went through the pandemic, you went through us going from in-person training to online, so thank you for bearing with us and your commitment to that. This year, with the 33 certificates being given, it's a good time to acknowledge that the upward trend in the number of people getting this certificate really ups the professionalism of librarianship in the state, and we're really excited about that. Very excited to see more and more people joining this program. We have over 150 people registered: directors, trustees, volunteers, other staff members. So thank you to trustees who supported your directors and staff members doing this. Thank you to directors who supported other staff members doing this. And also, as Kathy said, thank you to all the consultants at the department that helped teach the classes and, did many, many webinars and all that kind of thing. So we're going to read the names. I'm first going to read the names of the people who are not here. And then if everybody who's here that's getting a certificate could come gather up here so we can make this as efficient as possible, that would be great. So if you know you are getting a certificate, come up here near Kathy so she can give you your certificate and shake your hand. So the people that are not here: Rachel Pickle, Carrie Clancy, Reen Cressy from the West Rutland Free Library, Linda Fawcett, Butterfield Library, Westminster, Susan Gilbert from the Gilbert Hart Library in Wallingford, Riley Grant, Nicholas Kelm from the Newton Public Library, Kimberly McCrae Woodruff, and Ann Miller from the Jakewith Public Library, Sarah Mills, Aurora River from the Barnum Memorial Library in Jeffersonville, and June Turner from the Vernon Free Library. Okay, now I'm going to give you a hint. We're going to do this alphabetically. Okay, since you did the alphabet right, you're going to get your certificate. Okay, so we will start with Jennifer Amsbury from the Carpenter Cars Library in Hinesburg. Jill Anderson, also from Carpenter Cars Library in Hinesburg. Jennifer Clary from the Springfield Town Library. Elizabeth Frederick from the Mary L. Blood Library in Brownsville. Amanda Gates from the Warren Public Library. Jim Macho from the South Londonderry Free Library. Abigail Lordich. So now is when I wasn't sure if she was coming or not. It looks like she's not here, but Lori Mitchell from the Woodstock, North Williams Public Library, Woodstock, also here. Jennifer Molinsky from the William H. and Lucy F. Rand Memorial Library in North Florida. Mary Neppinger from the Bixby Memorial Free Library in Virginia. Levy from the H.F. Brigham Library in Bakersfield and the Franklin Grand Isle Bookmobile. Ann Romstead from the Waterbury Public Library. Sarah Spira from the Groton Free Public Library. Genevieve Toronto from the Charlotte Central Charlotte Central School, sorry. I got the alphabet wrong. Juliet Stevens, sorry. Juliet, Amy Vanderkoy from the Heartland Public Library. Eric Bennett, also from the Heartland Public Library. Sarah Webb. Amanda Whiting from the Brooks Memorial Library in Brattleboro. Michelle Wilbrandt from the Village School of North Bennington. And Kirsty Wilson from the Winooski Memorial Library. So, congratulations to all of you. I just forgot to point out a couple of statistics that are really cool. There are 33 people. We have one of the smallest libraries, a population of under 600 served, all the way up to Brattleboro, which is over 12,000, so big range there. And also, I believe there are 12 counties represented in these 33 people that just got their certificates. So congratulations, everybody.
Congratulations to all our certificate holders and awards. At this time, I am so delighted to introduce our keynote speaker for the 129th Vermont Library Conference. Emily Drabinski is Associate Professor at the Queens College Graduate School of Library and Information Studies. She publishes and presents widely on topics related to knowledge organization, information literacy, and critical perspectives in librarianship. Drabinski edits Gender and Sexuality in Information Studies, a book series from Library Juice Press Litwin Books. She's a contributing writer at Truth Out. She's currently serving as the president of the American Library Association. She's a very lovely human being. So happy to have her join us here today. Please join me in welcoming Emily. Thank you so much, Luciana, and thank you to everybody for getting up early for this part of the session. It's an honor to be with you. This meeting is my last chapter conference as ALA president. Definitely saved the best for last year in Vermont. Delighted to be here. I wanted to start by saying thank you to Oceana and to the conference committee for inviting me to join you here today. And a special thanks to Dina Marcher, an old friend and comrade, for the opportunity to reconnect after many years through this association. I also want to say thank you to everyone who did the difficult and often invisible work of organizing our time here together. I don't think there's anything more important that we could be doing together right now than being together in an organized way. And so I'm so grateful for the opportunities that we're all here. And I also, having organized many things, I know how much work goes into it. Like somebody had to choose that we're going to have the bagel tree. Is the person who made that bagel tree decision here? So somebody had to make that call, and it takes work to make that call. So I don't know all of the people who did that work, but I want you to know that I appreciate and acknowledge that labor, and there's plenty of coffee, no matter what people say. I'm going to make a bold claim in this talk. Libraries do good work. You might be saying, of course they do. What could be controversial about such a statement? I learned yesterday from my colleague on the executive board, Amy Lappin, who's here. Her library in Lebanon, New Hampshire.
So we've got an interloper here from New Hampshire. But her library circulates 23 garden beds. You can check out the garden bed for the season and use the seed library to grow what you want. Right? And that's just like one thing, and I'm sure that every single one of you has a story that would blow my mind about what your library does. They do good work, and everybody who goes into a library, who uses them, who hears about them, knows that. But unfortunately, you and I both know that our value is contested. And it's not just by the current organized censorship attacks that have gripped us for 2 years with little end in sight. Although I have to say I feel optimistic, more optimistic than I did at the beginning of the year. But also by years and even decades of budget cuts, staff reductions, increasing workloads, reliance on part-time workers, deprofessionalization, and more. We know, and we need everyone to know in this moment, that libraries do good work. I think at the end of the day, this sentence says everything, so I'm going to take it word by word. We're going to do a close reading. I'm an academic, so you're stuck with that. Because I think there's one thing that libraries and library workers know about a lot, and it's reading. How many of you are readers? Right? We know about reading. We know about information seeking, and we know about the kinds of environments that allow those practices to flourish in all of their true diversity, all of the different ways that we read, a diversity that reflects the diversity of Vermont, the diversity of our nation, which I think is our greatest strength. So we'll start with the word libraries. What are libraries? Fundamentally, libraries are institutions. They're community institutions. An institution is a thing that is meant to endure, and that endurance is part of its reason for being. A corporation, an organization, these things come and go, but if we call something an institution, we mean that it is designed to persist, and in its persistence, to support the growth of a community over time. More specifically, libraries are institutions that support reading, and reading is about much more than literacy narrowly defined. Reading refers to a set of practices that allow us to enlarge our horizons individually and collectively beyond our immediate circumstances. We read books. I finished a novel yesterday. Am I the last person to read Yellowface by Arthur Palmer? Wow, blew me away. It's so good. It was so absorbing. I stayed up too late reading it. But it was worth it, right? Because it gave me access to worlds and communities and ways of thinking and being that I would not otherwise be able to imagine. Thanks to reading the book, I have new ways of understanding sort of how publishing works, but also how representation works in our literary communities. Definitely go and read it, put it on your goals list. So we read, right? And it expands what we know about the world. I'm considering reading for my next book. I'm in this like kind of wild reading club where we have to read a book in 50 different categories. One of the categories is a book you always meant to read. So I'm thinking about encountering and taking on Moby Dick. So yeah, catch me after it and tell me if you think that's a good idea. But think for a moment about how important that reading is and what it gives us access to and how easy it is for some of us to take reading for granted, while for others, circumstances and structures conspire against their having had the time or the means to engage in it. If reading is a practice of freedom, then libraries are institutions of freedom. The persistence of libraries is something that I've learned a lot about over the last year as American Library Association president. Last July, I was visiting with another board member of ALA libraries in Iowa and saw a library in Marion that was destroyed by a derecho. So I know that you have experience with your libraries confronting climate change. The roof of the library in that town was ripped clear off the building. One of the librarians there, James Tehan, who had spent his whole life in the private sector but decided he wanted to give back to the place he grew up, and he started working in the library in Marion, quickly pivoted. The pivot, right? We're used to that. But despite what you might feel about that word after COVID, he pivoted, right? He took all of the technology that was in the library, he brought it out to a public park, figured out a way to plug it in, and the librarians worked one-on-one with patrons in the park, getting them access to online, like all the online forms you need to get insurance, right? That we're able to file their claims. So even in the face of destruction, the library persists. I think a lot about what, I've been doing some reflecting on my career over this year and like filling out online forms for people. That's like kind of what we do, right? So that's what he was doing in the park. The institution of the library, it persists. The second word in the sentence, do, reminds us that libraries are agents of change. Institutions are not passive things. If they are, they're doomed to fail because they won't keep up with the communities they serve and the needs of those communities. As agents of change, libraries not only respond to the needs of their communities according to a fixed idea of mission or purpose. As institutions, libraries also adapt themselves in order to find solutions to the problems that hinder human flourishing. Another stop I made in Iowa was at the Des Moines Public Library, where you can borrow a steam carpet cleaner. Holes list was 65 holes long. They had 3 of them, but I talked to that librarian a couple weeks ago, and they've now got 5. Right, they're responding to me by investing in more carpet cleaners. So carpet cleaning may not seem to have, at first glance, much to do with reading, much to do with freedom, but think for a moment about what it's like to live in a space that you cannot afford to keep clean, about the toll that that takes on your health, and potentially also on your sense of self. Access to a carpet cleaner may be, for some of us, part of what it takes to imagine themselves otherwise, to breathe with a sense of wider horizons. I distinctly remember my mother saving up for months to rent a carpet cleaner from the grocery store downtown Boise, Idaho, where I grew up. If she could have borrowed the carpet cleaner from a public library, so much could have been set at ease. Decisions like the one this library made, the decisions that you make in your libraries about what to collect and how to circulate, none of these decisions are simple, given how many and various are the needs of communities, and how limited are the resources most libraries operate with. Such decisions show that libraries are engaged in actively trying to improve the lives of their constituents. That's what we do. I can't think of another institution that says, I see a problem over there, let me try and fix it, and take some joy and pleasure in the fixing of that problem. Across the country, we know that libraries continue to lead the way in the provision of free internet access, restroom facilities. I live in New York City now, there's nowhere to go to the bathroom. If you can't afford the price of an Egg McMuffin, there's nowhere to go to the bathroom in the city of New York except for the public library. Gutting budget cuts from our mayor mean that the libraries are closed on Sunday. So if you need to go to the bathroom on Sunday, in New York City, a town of 8 million people, you're out of luck. Libraries are warm spaces in which to come in from the cold, cool spaces in which to come in from the heat, private spaces for conversation, study, or simply thought. And I think here it has to be said that it's the agency of libraries that's precisely what draws us into the sphere of political and politicizing attacks. Libraries are not political organizations. As I've said, they're institutions. Political organizations promise benefits to their supporters in return for loyalty and ideological commitment. Libraries do not demand loyalty. We do not enforce ideological commitments. Libraries are for everyone. Libraries are for me, they're for you, and our institutions offer freedom, right? The freedom to be who you are, explore who you might be, within the anchoring stability of an institution that is meant to survive the changing winds of political fortune and partisan identity. Now, for those of you who follow me in my work, it may surprise you to hear that I don't believe that libraries are political organizations. I have been, we talk about it at the break, but I've been very open about my own political commitments and beliefs. I've written my whole career about power in libraries and how it shapes organizations, how it shapes knowledge, production, and dissemination. My work on the politics of library catalogs has challenged U.S. hegemony. I argue for a reckoning with the colonial roots of knowledge organization systems. In addition to my work as a librarian, I've spent a ton of time in the labor movement, and I've been on strike, I've been locked out. I was part of the first lockout of faculty in the history of U.S. higher education. My politics are easy to find. I don't have to tweet about them. You can just Google me. And my politics absolutely 100% shape my analysis. But what I'm talking about here is a different sense of politics. What I'm describing are my personal ways of understanding how the world came to be as it is. Why is there so much inequality? Why are libraries reckoning with the kind of gap in sort of access to the needs of a full and meaningful human life? Why are we asked to step into that and solve that breach from where we are, right? Like that question, that's what haunts and animates me. And politics helps me understand so much about what in the world is otherwise inexplicable. But none of that detracts from the fundamentally nonpartisan and apolitical nature of libraries as institutions that are for everyone, regardless of means, regardless of ideology, no matter what language you speak, what clothes you're wearing, whether I agree with you or not, or whether you agree with me. What libraries are experiencing right now is a politicization of our work, as people ask who we are for and who we are against. We live in a time when collecting books about queer and black lives, books about people like me, and I'm like a nice guy, let's chat in the hallway, right? Just people about me, is seen as endorsing a particular political agenda, not as a fundamental professional work of librarians. What's our job, right? We select books that reflect a wide range of interests and experiences, and we collect them for the public. That's what makes us different from other people. Like if I was building a library just based on what I believe, there would be no science fiction or fantasy books in the library. I don't like them. They're too long. Why are there 3 of them? Right? Why are there 5 of them? And every time I say that to them, they're like, have you read Murderbot? Yes, I've read Murderbot. Not interested, right? But we don't collect for us, we collect for everyone, right? And that's fundamentally apolitical work. We know that the political winds buffeting us now, or I have to believe it, will not be the winds that buffet us forever. We know that not only can things be different, because we know they have been before, but we know that they will be after this moment. But it's what we do, our action and our agency, that I think is so crucial and important. So let's talk about good. Libraries do good work. This means that the agency of libraries as institutions is directed toward the good, the common good, the public good, not talking about what one person or group of people consider to be best for a community, right? We're not talking about a no fantasy, no books that take place in space kind of library, right? Good. We're not talking about good books or bad books. Such a judgment implies an exercise of power, the power to decide for others, the power to dole out benefits according to a perspective that supposedly knows better than everyone else. All agency involves judgment, right? And in running an institution like a library, the exercise of judgment is inevitable. Money must be spent on a necessarily finite set of things. Some books and not others, carpet cleaners and not pool tables are not pianos, and in libraries, such judgments are especially fraught by the imperative to carefully weigh competing needs and divergent impacts. Needs and impacts that at the end of the day aren't really commensurable because they simply involve different ways of being human. Different people are just different. A carpet cleaner only helps people with carpets to clean. I spent a lot of time in ski resorts like this one because my family loves to ski. I don't know why you would pay money to be cold and wet outside. But it means that I come to places like Killington with my family and I always go to the library. And I was in a library in Whistler, Canada over the winter, a resort town that swells with skiers and like really fancy skiers, right, which I'm sure you experience here in Vermont all the time. But they're served by a primarily low-income and transient working population, many of whom cannot afford to live in the town in which they work. That means that you have a lot of people in resort communities like this one who live in their vans. So the library there in Whistler lends both an extensive DVD collection and the machines that can play them, so that patrons who do not have access in any other way to the pleasures of human, like everybody should have the capacity to watch Die Hard at Christmas, right? Like that should be available to all of us. So Director Mikhail Fenton has made a judgment about how to expend her resources, right, based on the community needs and the project of doing good for the community. But that project is so fraught and so difficult, which is why it's so important that the judgments library workers make are professional judgments. And I don't mean here people made by people with the right kind of credentials, although the MLS conversation is one we could have a whole other conference about that. But what I mean here is informed by professional standards that have evolved over more than a century of practice and which constantly evolve through the ongoing commitment to education, deliberation, and discussion by practicing professionals. In that definition, anyone is a professional whose practice is informed by those standards and who shares in those commitments. Libraries as institutions are supported by the institution that is the library profession, which is kept alive by the various professional associations. The American Library Association, which I'm representing today, your state associations, the VLA, that's what keeps us sort of alive, and by the hard work of librarians like all of us here in the room. And we do our work in part because of our shared commitment to the public good, one of the core values of American librarianship, as articulated by generations through the ALA. In a democratic society, the public good means the freedom to flourish. And it necessarily includes the maintenance and provision of those things that people need to exercise that freedom. Books, yes, access to the means of imagination, but also to the resources necessary for everyone in a community to have access to something beyond bare life. Across the country, library workers are facing restrictions on our agency. Whether it's legislation with vague and unenforceable threats against library workers who share a wide range of materials with children, from Missouri to Florida, Texas to Tennessee, most recently and most devastating to me as a native Idahoan, to people in Idaho, where now you are subject to a $250 fine if you refuse to move a book from a youth collection to an adult collection at the request of someone who comes into your library. In a highly rural state, like how many of you work in libraries that have a single room? Where are you going to move that book? So there are libraries who are closing their doors to children, closing their doors to all patrons, because of this vague and broad law that opens them up to an extraordinary financial and personal risk. That makes that we are living under conditions that make choosing a book about Black life or about queer life and putting it on the shelf is actually a pretty big ask. And our ability to simply do our jobs is under threat. So part of what we're fighting for right now is to protect this, the fact of our own agency, our own professional judgment, our capacity to make decisions about what our libraries do and who and how they serve. Library workers need to be empowered to make decisions that best serve our patrons and our communities without the intrusion of those who imagine they could run a library better than we can. I often wonder if these guys could even find a book on the shelf, you know? Like, do you know how to use a number? Libraries do good work. So now we come to the last word in that sentence. I could say a lot more about the public good, and I'm sure we all could. And as library workers, that's an idea that's intimately connected to our practice. But to come to the last word in the sentence with which I began, work. Because of all of this, the agency of an institution committed not only to its own enduring, but to the enduring of the goods that belong to the community and that support the community's maximal flourishing, it takes work. It takes a lot of work. I don't need to tell you that. Between story times and teen tech hours, English language learning circles, open access initiatives, AI, which I respectfully, I'm tapping out. Like, people ask me about ChatGPT everywhere I go, I'm like, next. I can't, right? But everything we do takes an extraordinary amount of work. The first question pretty much everybody asks me these days is why? Why did you run for president of the American Library Association? I'll admit I ask myself this question quite a lot, although with 6 weeks rounding the bend, I'm more sure than ever that it was the right thing to do, and it's important work. But I believe that the work of the ALA president right now, the work of all of us, is that we need to use this moment in history where more people are looking at libraries, trying to understand who we are, what we do, and why we seem to make some people so angry. We need to use this moment to tell the stories of library workers whose commitment to our institutions make communities great. Sometimes that means we shelter people from catastrophic weather. Sometimes it means we take the time, sometimes could be hours, to get patrons signed up for the email address necessary to access public benefits, to apply for employment, to connect with friends and family. I think sometimes our policymakers have never met someone without an email address. Have you met people without an email address? Yeah, right? That's a lot of work to get people signed up for something like that. And it means sometimes finding the right book for the reader, expanding access to the joys of human imagination. I want everyone to know who we are and what we do each day and why it matters even more than they think. That's the work that all of us have in front of us from where I sit. So I don't want to miss any opportunity to celebrate the work we do. Work that's become harder recently for a lot of folks through the calculated and targeted misrepresentation of that work by people with political agendas and for narrowly partisan ends. Attacks on libraries are attacks on library workers. The fight for the right to read is a fight for the right to libraries, and it also means a fight for all of us to preserve our agency and authority, promote our skills and expertise, and ensure that every library worker has what she needs to thrive both on and off the job. How many of you have spent most of your career listening to people tell you that the library is over, that it doesn't matter anymore, that it's a portal, the internet is like, got it, right? Like, I spent my whole career trying to explain that libraries matter and are important. To go to a quick shift where now libraries are not only not irrelevant, but the most dangerous public institutions on the planet, right? Hey, I'll take it, right? Because it gives us I'm not really, right? But I will take this opportunity to talk about what we do and who we are. Because when you tell people that you can check out a garden bed at the Lebanon Public Library, that you can check out, how many of you circulate cake pans? that you could check out a cake pan, right? There's a tiny library in rural Idaho, in Donnelly, Idaho, run by Sherry Shaline, who's one of my favorite librarians. You know Sherry, yeah, right? Sherry's fantastic. And so what Sherry has in her library is a cotton candy machine and a bounce house. Yeah. Tiny rural community where a majority of people under the age of 18 live below the poverty line, devastated by poverty, opioid epidemic, all the things that are confronting rural communities across the country, extreme economic inequality. Everybody in that town, every kid has a right to a birthday party with a bounce house and some cotton candy, right? Like, you can't not love it. And that's what we're fighting for. We're fighting not just for the right to read books, but for the right of all of us to have access to the goods of the community, the goods that rightfully belong to us. Libraries work because we do. From this perspective, our opponents, I think, feed on a climate of pessimism about both institutions and labor. They feed on the idea that institutions are bound to fail, that they can't be trusted to fulfill their missions, and on the related idea that workers have no voice and no power, and therefore that we ought just to be grateful to have a job at all. But institutions succeed where workers do have power. Schools succeed not only because teachers care about their work, but because they are empowered to respond to the needs of their students in the moment, which is something that no curriculum, however thoughtfully planned, can anticipate. Teachers know this. And library workers know that meeting the needs of our users and patrons requires not only good policy and adequate training, these are indispensable, but it also requires having the space and the grace to adapt professional practice to the situation at hand, where the rubber meets the road. This is hard work physically and emotionally, and it's a labor too of the imagination. We have to be able to put ourselves in the shoes of those whose needs we serve, to see things from their perspective. Isn't that, after all, the essence of the reference interview? And of so many other parts of librarianship. We need everyone to know and understand this. To value not just the library, because people do, they love libraries, everybody will tell you they love the library. The vast majority of us love the library, but also the people, you and me, the people who make libraries go. We find ourselves in a moment where this good work is under attack by a loud minority. In many cases, that loud minority has access to significant power. That's a big problem. we need to be thinking broadly about how to remove power from those who would oppose us in our work. But we also need to lean into what we have, which I believe is everybody. I believe everybody's on our side. Right? When you really talk to them, did you ever check out a picture book for your kid at the library? You know, everybody's done that. That's a near universal experience in this country. So that everyone is what I really try to focus on and what I lean into. So I'll close on that idea of everyone. I lean into numbers all the time. If you know me, you know I'm always working a list. I always have my spreadsheets open. I'm always counting the number of people that I have. We got everybody. So I want to remind all of us in the room that even when things get hard, when they feel lonely, when they get scary, when you're the person at the desk dealing with a screaming person who comes in, or you're looking at legislation that's pending, and that it sounds like Vermont is very lucky to have this new piece of legislation, which I learned about last night. But that fear that I think a lot of us are facing right now, I want to remind us that the vast majority of people in this country support libraries, support the right to read, across party lines, across the political spectrum, Marxist, lesbian or not. Survey after survey tells us this. That can be difficult to remember sometimes when you're alone. You're not alone. All of us are with you. I am with you. And I believe that we're going to win. And we're going to win because we're right, and we're going to win, just as a reminder, because everybody agrees with us. So thank you so much for the time to share today. I wish that we had time for questions, but we don't. But I'll be here at the conference until around 2:30, so please find me in the hallway. And thank you so much again for the invitation.